The letter from the Meadowbrook Hills Homeowners Association arrived on a Tuesday morning, and I could tell from the formal letterhead and certified mail sticker that this was going to be trouble. I'm Jake Lawson, and I've owned the gravel quarry on the outskirts of Cedar Springs, Colorado for the past 8 years, ever since my father passed and left me the business he'd built from nothing. What I didn't know when I opened that envelope was that I was about to become the most hated man in a community of 200 affluent homeowners who thought the world owed them everything. The letter was signed by Patricia Morrison, president of the Meadowbrook Hills HOA, and it informed me in the most condescending tone possible that the association would be requiring 1,500 tons of gravel for road repairs throughout their gated community. They needed it within 2 months, and they were graciously offering to pay me $40 per ton delivered. I read it twice, then laughed out loud in my kitchen. The market rate for quality crushed limestone gravel was $90 per ton, and that was before delivery costs. These people wanted me to provide them with premium material at less than half price because they apparently thought their neighborhood status entitled them to charity. I tossed the letter on my counter and went about my day, managing the quarry operations and coordinating deliveries to the 3 construction companies and 2 municipalities that actually paid fair rates for our products. Lawson Quarry wasn't the biggest operation in Colorado, but we had something special. The limestone deposits on my property were some of the highest quality in the state, perfect for road base and concrete aggregate. My father had spent 30 years building relationships with clients who valued quality and reliability. I wasn't about to undercut my own business for some entitled HOA board. 3 days later, my phone rang at 7 in the morning. I was already up making coffee before heading out to the quarry, but I wasn't expecting calls this early. "Is this Jake Lawson?" a sharp female voice demanded before I could even finish saying hello. "Speaking. Who's this?" "Patricia Morrison, president of Meadowbrook Hills HOA. I'm calling about the gravel order we sent you. We haven't received your confirmation or delivery schedule." I took a sip of coffee and leaned against my kitchen counter. "That's because I'm not accepting the job, Mrs. Morrison." There was a pause that felt like the calm before a storm. "Excuse me? Your offer is less than half the market rate. I can't accept those terms." "Mr. Lawson, perhaps you don't understand the opportunity here. Meadowbrook Hills is the premier residential community in Cedar Springs. The exposure and goodwill from working with us could benefit your little business tremendously." I actually laughed at that. "Mrs. Morrison, I appreciate the call, but I don't need exposure. I need to pay my workers and keep my equipment running. That requires customers who pay fair prices." "Your father was always very accommodating to community needs," she said, her voice dripping with disapproval. That hit a nerve. "My father charged fair rates to everyone, including your HOA, when they bought gravel 15 years ago. I checked the records. He charged $85 per ton back then. The economy was different then. We're offering what we can afford given our budget constraints." "Then I suggest you find another supplier or adjust your budget. Have a good day, Mrs. Morrison." I hung up before she could respond. I knew it was probably rude, but something about her tone and the way she tried to invoke my father's memory made my blood boil. My dad had been fair, but he'd never been a pushover. He'd taught me that running a business meant respecting yourself and your product enough to charge what it was worth. The next week, I got another letter from the HOA, this time with more formal language threatening to report me to the Better Business Bureau for price gouging and anti-competitive practices. I showed it to my attorney, Marcus Chen, who'd handled the quarry's legal matters for years. Marcus read it in his office downtown, then set it down with a bemused expression. "This is nonsense. They can't compel you to sell at any price, and charging market rate isn't price gouging. Do you want me to send them a response?" "Yeah, keep it polite but firm. Let them know my rates and that I'm happy to do business at those rates if they're interested." Marcus drafted a professional letter explaining that Lawson Quarry charged $90 per ton for crushed limestone gravel, with delivery fees calculated based on distance and quantity. For 1,500 tons delivered to Meadowbrook Hills, which was about 20 miles from my quarry, the total quote would be $143,000. That included the delivery cost of $8 per ton and a bulk discount I was willing to offer. It was a fair price, actually better than what I'd charge a smaller order. I thought that would be the end of it. I figured they'd either accept my terms or find another supplier. What I didn't know was that Meadowbrook Hills had already tried every other quarry within a 100-mile radius. Cedar Springs was in a unique geological area. Most of the surrounding quarries produced decomposed granite or river rock, neither of which was suitable for road base. The next closest source of crushed limestone was over 150 miles away, which would make the delivery costs astronomical. I learned this 2 weeks later when Patricia Morrison showed up at my quarry unannounced. I was in the main office, a modest building near the entrance to the property, when my operations manager, Tom, came to tell me there was a woman demanding to see me. Patricia Morrison was exactly what I'd imagined. She was probably in her mid-50s, with precisely styled blonde hair, designer sunglasses pushed up on her head, and the kind of outfit that cost more than most people's monthly rent. She stood in my dusty office like she'd walked into a contaminated zone, her lips pressed into a thin line of distaste. "Mr. Lawson, we need to talk about your unreasonable pricing." I gestured to the chair across from my desk, but she remained standing. "My pricing is standard for the market, Mrs. Morrison. If you have quotes from other suppliers offering crushed limestone at lower rates, I'd be happy to review them. Other suppliers aren't the point. The point is that Meadowbrook Hills is a valuable community asset. Our property values contribute significantly to Cedar Springs' tax base. When our roads deteriorate, it affects everyone. Then everyone should be concerned that you're trying to cut corners on road repair materials. Quality gravel is essential for proper road base. Using inferior materials means you'll be doing this again in 2 years instead of 10. Her face flushed. "We're not trying to cut corners. We're trying to be fiscally responsible with our homeowners' money. And I'm trying to be fiscally responsible with my business. Mrs. Morrison, I charge $90 per ton. That's my price for everyone from the state highway department to private contractors. I don't play favorites, and I don't give discounts based on who thinks they're important." She straightened her shoulders. "You're making a mistake, Mr. Lawson. Meadowbrook Hills represents influential people. We have connections throughout this county. Is that a threat? It's a reality. You might find doing business becomes more difficult if you continue to be obstinate." I stood up from my desk, keeping my voice level but firm. "Mrs. Morrison, I think this meeting is over. You know my rates. You're welcome to accept them or find another supplier. But coming here to intimidate me isn't going to change anything." She stared at me for a long moment, then turned on her expensive heels and marched out. Through my office window, I watched her climb into a white Mercedes SUV and speed away, leaving a cloud of dust in her wake. Tom came in after she left, shaking his head. "That woman's got some nerve." "She's used to getting her way," I said. "Probably works on most people." "You think she'll actually try to cause trouble?" I shrugged, but I had a bad feeling in my gut. People like that usually do. I was right. Within a week, a county inspector showed up to conduct a routine inspection of the quarry. We were inspected annually, and our last inspection had been 4 months ago with perfect marks. This inspector, a nervous young guy named David who clearly didn't want to be there, went through everything with a fine-tooth comb. He measured water runoff, checked our blasting permits, examined our equipment certifications, and reviewed every environmental compliance document we had. At the end of the day, he couldn't find a single violation. I kept meticulous records and ran a clean operation. My father had drilled that into me from the time I was old enough to work at the quarry. Still, the message was clear. Someone had pushed for this inspection, and I knew exactly who. The harassment escalated over the next month. I received a notice from the county zoning board questioning whether my quarry operations complied with current land use regulations, despite having operated on the same permit for 35 years. I got a letter from the EPA asking about our dust control measures, which were already above and beyond requirements. Every inspection and inquiry came back clean, but each one cost me time and stress. Marcus advised me to document everything. "If this continues, we might have grounds for a harassment lawsuit," he said, "but proving who's behind it could be tricky." The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. I was having lunch at Ruby's Diner in downtown Cedar Springs when an older gentleman approached my table. I recognized him as Gerald Fisher, a retired civil engineer who'd done consulting work with my father years ago. "Jake, do you have a minute?" he asked. "Of course, Mr. Fisher. Please, sit down." He slid into the booth across from me, looking troubled. "I want you to know I had nothing to do with this, but I heard something at the Meadowbrook Hills board meeting last week that concerned me." "You live in Meadowbrook?" He nodded. "Bought a place there 5 years ago when I retired. It's nice enough, but the HOA board is out of control. Patricia Morrison has been on a crusade about the road situation, and your name keeps coming up." I figured she was behind the inspections. "It's worse than that. She's been pushing the board to file a formal complaint with the county claiming your quarry is causing environmental damage to the neighborhood. She wants to use it as leverage to force you to lower your prices." My jaw clenched. "There's no environmental damage. We're 20 miles away, and we exceed every environmental standard." "I know that. And so do several other board members with engineering or construction backgrounds. But Patricia doesn't care about facts. She's convinced that if she can make life difficult enough for you, you'll cave. She actually said in the meeting that she's dealt with stubborn men before and knows how to handle them." "What happened in the meeting?" Gerald sighed. "She got shouted down by a few of us, but she still has supporters. The roads really are in bad shape, and some homeowners don't care about the methods as long as the problem gets fixed. The vote to file the environmental complaint was tabled, but she's going to bring it up again." I thanked Gerald for the warning and promised to keep him out of any fallout. After he left, I sat in that diner booth, my lunch growing cold, trying to decide my next move. I could keep fighting off false complaints and harassment, or I could go on offense. That evening, I made some calls. I started with the 2 municipalities I supplied gravel to and confirmed that they were satisfied with my products and pricing. Both city managers gave me written statements praising the quarry's quality and professionalism. Then, I called 3 construction companies I regularly worked with and got similar endorsements. I was building a file proving that my rates were not only fair but standard across the industry. Next, I called Gerald back. "I need a favor, and you can say no if it puts you in an awkward position." "What do you need?" "I want to know the HOA's budget for the road repair. If they're claiming they can only afford $40 per ton, I want to see the actual numbers." There was a pause. "The budget is supposed to be available to all homeowners. I can request it as a member of the community." 3 days later, Gerald handed me a folder at a coffee shop across town from Cedar Springs. Inside was the Meadowbrook Hills HOA budget for the current year, along with their reserve fund statement and the specific allocation for road repairs. I studied the numbers with growing disbelief. The HOA had budgeted $160,000 for road repairs. They'd claimed they could only afford $60,000 for gravel, but the actual budget showed they were trying to pocket the difference or redirect it to other projects. According to the notes, Patricia had proposed using the savings from getting cheaper gravel to build a new fountain at the community entrance. "She's been telling homeowners that you're price gouging," Gerald said quietly. "But the truth is, she wants to spend their money on her vanity projects." I photographed every page of the budget documents, making sure everything was clearly legible. This was exactly what I needed. The next HOA board meeting was scheduled for the following Thursday evening. Gerald told me it was open to homeowners and, technically, guests if they were there to address the board on a relevant issue. I decided it was time to stop being reactive and start being proactive. Thursday evening, I dressed in clean jeans and a button-down shirt and drove to Meadowbrook Hills. The gated community was impressive, I had to admit. Wide streets lined with expensive homes, manicured lawns, and decorative streetlights every 50 feet. It was also obvious which roads needed repair. Several streets had significant cracking and pothole damage, exactly the kind of deterioration that happened when road base failed due to age or poor initial construction. The meeting was held in the community clubhouse, a sprawling building with a gym, pool, and meeting rooms. About 40 homeowners were scattered throughout the main meeting room when I arrived. Patricia Morrison sat at a table at the front with 4 other board members, including a thin man with glasses who I later learned was the treasurer, and a younger woman who served as secretary. Patricia's face went pale when she saw me walk in, then quickly reddened with anger. "This is a homeowners meeting, residents only." Gerald stood up from his seat in the middle of the room. "I invited him as my guest to address an issue on the agenda. The bylaws allow for that." Patricia looked like she wanted to argue, but several other homeowners nodded in agreement. She pressed her lips together. Fine, but you'll wait until we reach the appropriate agenda item. I took a seat next to Gerald and waited. The meeting dragged through various neighborhood concerns, discussions about landscaping contracts, complaints about someone's unauthorized fence, and a lengthy debate about pool hours. Finally, after nearly an hour, Patricia announced they were moving to the road repair discussion. As everyone knows, our roads are in desperate need of repair, she began. We've budgeted appropriately for this work, but we've encountered an obstacle. The only nearby supplier of suitable gravel is engaging in price gouging, trying to charge nearly double the fair market rate. We're exploring our legal options to address this situation. I raised my hand. I'd like to address the board. Patricia's nostrils flared. Mr. Lawson, this is not the appropriate forum. Actually, it is, Gerald said calmly. He's the subject of your discussion, and he has relevant information to share. Several homeowners murmured in agreement. Patricia had no choice but to allow it. I stood and walked to the front of the room, pulling out my phone where I'd saved copies of all my documents. My name is Jake Lawson, and I own Lawson Quarry. Mrs. Morrison has accused me of price gouging, but that's not accurate. I charge $90 per ton for crushed limestone gravel, which is the standard market rate. I have written statements from 2 city governments and 3 major construction companies confirming this. I pulled up the documents on my phone and held it out. I'm happy to show anyone here these statements. My father ran this quarry for 30 years with a reputation for fair dealing, and I've continued that tradition. I don't charge more because someone has money, and I don't charge less because someone thinks they deserve a discount. Your prices are excessive, Patricia snapped. No, they're not. And here's what's really interesting. I pulled up the photos of the budget documents. According to the HOA's own budget, you have $160,000 allocated for road repairs. At my quoted price, the gravel you need would cost about $140,000 delivered. That's within your budget. But you offered me $60,000 and claimed that's all you could afford. Where's the other $100,000 going? The room erupted. Homeowners started shouting questions at Patricia, who looked like she'd been slapped. The treasurer grabbed his laptop and started frantically typing. That budget information is confidential, Patricia shouted. No, it's not, Gerald said, standing up. It's supposed to be available to all homeowners. I requested it as a resident, which is my right under the bylaws. A woman in the front row stood up. Patricia, is this true? Do we have enough money for the gravel at his price? Patricia's face was now scarlet. We're trying to be fiscally responsible. The remaining funds are designated for other community improvements. What improvements? Someone else called out. The secretary, looking increasingly uncomfortable, spoke up quietly. The fountain proposal and the new signage. The room exploded again. I learned later that Patricia had been pushing for an elaborate fountain at the community entrance and custom street signs for every road in the development. Together, those projects would cost nearly $100,000, money that was supposed to be for road repairs. You're playing games with our safety, a man in the back shouted. These roads are dangerous. My wife hit a pothole last month that destroyed her tire and wheel. That cost us $800. Patricia tried to regain control. We can accomplish both goals if we can negotiate reasonable pricing. My pricing is reasonable, I said firmly. It's the market rate and it's fair. What's not reasonable is trying to bully me into taking a loss so you can build decorative fountains. I spent the next 30 minutes answering questions from homeowners about the gravel quality, delivery timeline, and exactly what my quote included. The more I talked, the angrier the residents became, not at me, but at their HOA board. It turned out that Patricia had been telling homeowners that the road repairs would cost nearly $300,000, which was why they'd recently approved a special assessment of $1,500 per household. The homeowners had paid that assessment thinking it was necessary, only to learn that the actual work would cost half that amount. By the end of the meeting, 3 board members had resigned in protest, including the treasurer. The remaining homeowners voted to remove Patricia as president and appointed Gerald as interim president until a special election could be held. Patricia left the meeting in a fury, threatening lawsuits against everyone involved. 2 days later, I received a call from Gerald in his new capacity as HOA president. Jake, I want to formally accept your quote for the gravel delivery. Can we get a contract drawn up? Absolutely. I'll have my attorney draft something and send it over. There's something else, Gerald said, his voice more serious. When the new treasurer went through the books more carefully, he found some irregularities. It looks like Patricia may have been siphoning HOA funds for personal use. We're talking about potentially $50,000 or more over the past 2 years. You're kidding. I wish I was. We've contacted the police and they're opening an investigation. I wanted you to know because she might try to blame you for exposing her or claim this is all a setup. I thanked him for the warning. True to Gerald's prediction, Patricia tried to spin the narrative. She posted on local social media groups claiming that I'd sabotaged the HOA and violated her privacy by obtaining confidential documents. But her posts were quickly countered by Meadowbrook Hills residents who explained what had really happened. The investigation into Patricia's financial dealings took 3 months. During that time, I delivered the gravel to Meadowbrook Hills as contracted, working with Gerald and the new board to coordinate the road repairs. The work was done by a reputable paving company, and the results were excellent. The roads were properly graded, new base was laid with my crushed limestone, and fresh asphalt was applied. The homeowners were thrilled with the quality. As for Patricia, the investigation uncovered that she'd been using HOA funds to pay for personal expenses, including luxury vacations, spa treatments, and even a new car that she'd claimed was for community business. She'd created fake invoices and manipulated records to hide the theft. In total, she'd stolen nearly $75,000 from the Homeowners Association. The district attorney charged her with embezzlement, fraud, and theft. I had to testify at her preliminary hearing about the events that led to the discovery of her financial crimes. It was strange sitting in that courtroom, knowing that my simple refusal to discount my gravel had unraveled her entire scheme. Patricia's attorney tried to argue that she'd been set up, that I'd fabricated documents or manipulated the investigation because of a business dispute. But the evidence was overwhelming. Multiple forensic accountants had traced the stolen money, and the fake invoices were clearly her work. The judge found probable cause to proceed to trial. I attended the trial, though I wasn't required to. It lasted 2 weeks with testimony from homeowners, the former treasurer who'd helped cover up the theft unknowingly, and financial experts who explained how Patricia had hidden her crimes. The most damning evidence came from her own bank records, which showed deposits that coincided with withdrawals from the HOA accounts. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours before returning guilty verdicts on all counts. Patricia Morrison was sentenced to 5 years in state prison and ordered to pay full restitution to the Homeowners Association, plus penalties and interest. Her husband, who apparently had no knowledge of her crimes, filed for divorce before she was even transported to prison. The case made local news, and for a few weeks, I couldn't go anywhere in Cedar Springs without people wanting to talk about it. Most were supportive, thanking me for standing my ground and inadvertently exposing corruption. A few thought I should have just given the HOA a discount and avoided the whole mess, but I didn't regret my decisions. The Meadowbrook Hills HOA flourished under new leadership. Gerald served as president for a year before a retired school administrator named Helen took over. They implemented new financial controls, requiring multiple approvals for any expenditure over $5,000 and mandatory annual audits by independent accountants. The community became known for transparency and responsible governance. My business benefited too, though not in the way Patricia had mockingly suggested. I didn't get exposure or goodwill from working with an influential community. Instead, I got a reputation as someone who wouldn't be pushed around and who stood by his principles. Several other HOAs and property management companies reached out to me for gravel supplies, specifically mentioning that they had heard about my integrity during the Meadowbrook situation. One of those new clients was Riverside Estates, an even larger community about 30 miles south of Cedar Springs. Their property manager, a straightforward woman named Carol, called me 6 months after the trial concluded. "I heard what happened with Meadowbrook Hills," she said. "I respect someone who charges fair prices and doesn't play games. We need about 2,000 tons of crushed limestone for our roads. What's your rate?" I quoted her $90 per ton, explained the delivery fees, and offered a modest bulk discount for the larger order. She accepted immediately, and we completed that job without a single problem. Carol became one of my regular clients, ordering materials for various projects throughout the Riverside Estates community. The situation taught me several important lessons about business and human nature. I learned that there are people who view negotiation as warfare, who think that grinding down suppliers is smart business rather than short-sighted exploitation. I learned that standing firm on fair pricing isn't stubbornness, it's self-respect. And I learned that sometimes the right thing to do is the hardest thing to do, but the results are worth it. My father used to say that a business built on integrity might grow slower, but it grows stronger. I understood what he meant now. If I'd caved to Patricia's demands and accepted her lowball offer, I would have set a precedent that my prices were negotiable, that pressure and intimidation worked. Other clients might have demanded similar discounts, and I'd have been trapped in a race to the bottom that would have eventually destroyed the quarry. Instead, I proved that Lawson Quarry had standards, and those standards weren't for sale at any price. The clients I wanted, the ones who valued quality and fair dealing, took notice. The ones who wanted to play games went elsewhere, and I was better off without them. About a year after Patricia's sentencing, I expanded the quarry operations. I bought an adjacent piece of property that had similar limestone deposits and invested in new equipment that made our crushing operation more efficient. I was able to hire 3 more employees, bringing our total workforce to 15 people. Each of those jobs supported a family in Cedar Springs, contributing to the local economy in real, tangible ways. Gerald and I became friends through the whole ordeal. He'd often stop by the quarry to chat about engineering projects or just to catch up. One afternoon, we were standing on a ridge overlooking the main pit, watching the crushers reduce blasted stone into various grades of gravel. "You ever regret how everything went down?" he asked. I thought about it for a moment, watching the afternoon sun glint off the crushed limestone as it moved along the conveyor belts. Not for a second. I mean, I could have done without the harassment and the legal drama, but standing my ground was the right call. "Patricia might disagree," he said with a slight grin. "Patricia made her own choices. I didn't make her steal money or try to intimidate people. I just refused to be a victim of her schemes." Gerald nodded thoughtfully. "You know what's interesting? The Homeowners Association actually saved money in the long run by using your gravel. The roads are holding up beautifully. We had an engineer inspect them last month, and he said they should be good for at least 15 years with minimal maintenance. If we'd gone with cheap material from some distant supplier just to save a few bucks, we'd probably be doing repairs again in 5 years. That's what I tried to tell Patricia," I said. But she wasn't interested in quality. She just wanted to skim money for her pet projects and her own pockets. The breeze picked up, carrying the scent of dust and diesel from the working machinery. It was a smell I'd grown up with, one that meant honest work and earned money. My father had built this quarry with his hands and his integrity, and I was determined to honor that legacy. My personal life improved too. The stress of the conflict with the HOA had consumed me for months, but once it was resolved, I found I had energy for other things. I started dating someone I'd met at Ruby's Diner, a teacher named Sarah who had no connection to the quarry or the HOA drama. She appreciated that I ran a successful business, but didn't define myself by it. We took things slow, but it felt right in a way that relationships hadn't felt in years. The quarry continued to thrive. We secured contracts with the Colorado Department of Transportation for several highway projects, which meant steady work for the next 3 years. I implemented profit sharing for my employees, giving them a direct stake in the company's success. Morale was high, turnover was low, and our reputation in the industry kept growing. Tom, my operations manager, mentioned one day that we'd been approached by a corporate buyer interested in purchasing the quarry. The offer was substantial, enough that I could retire comfortably if I wanted to. I didn't even consider it seriously. "This isn't just a business," I told Tom. "It's my father's legacy and my future. Money's great, but this place means something. It's part of Cedar Springs, part of the community's history. I'm not selling." Tom grinned. "Good. I wasn't looking forward to breaking in a new boss." There were still challenges, of course. The equipment broke down occasionally, requiring expensive repairs. We had to navigate changing environmental regulations and maintain our permits. Competition from other quarries meant I couldn't rest on my reputation. But these were normal business challenges, the kind my father had dealt with and taught me to handle. What I didn't have to deal with anymore was people trying to take advantage of me. Word had spread about the Meadowbrook Hills situation, and I noticed a change in how potential clients approached negotiations. They came with reasonable expectations and respectful attitudes. The ones who tried to lowball or play games quickly learned I wasn't interested, and they either adjusted their approach or went elsewhere. I also made a point to be generous where it mattered. When the local high school needed gravel for their new practice fields, I donated it at cost. When a wildfire damaged roads in the mountains west of Cedar Springs and the county's emergency budget was strained, I gave them a significant discount to help with repairs. These weren't situations where someone was trying to manipulate me. These were genuine needs in my community, and I had the means to help. The difference was respect. The high school principal and the county emergency manager approached me with humility and honesty, explaining their situations and asking if I could help. They didn't demand, threaten, or try to manipulate. They treated me as a human being and a business owner, and I responded in kind. Patricia Morrison's case became something of a cautionary tale in Cedar Springs. Other HOAs in the area implemented stricter financial controls and oversight, not wanting to experience the same scandal. Property management companies started requiring more frequent audits and transparency. In a weird way, Patricia's crimes led to positive changes throughout the county's HOA governance. I ran into Patricia's ex-husband, Richard, at a grocery store about 18 months after her sentencing. He approached me hesitantly, clearly uncomfortable. "Mr. Lawson, I want to apologize for everything Patricia put you through," he said quietly. "I had no idea what she was doing, either to you or to the HOA. I feel like an idiot for not seeing it." "You don't need to apologize for her actions," I told him. "She made her own choices. Still, I know she caused you a lot of trouble. For what it's worth, I'm glad you stood your ground. If you hadn't, she might have gotten away with it for years and stolen even more money." We talked for a few minutes. Richard had moved to a smaller house outside of Meadowbrook Hills, wanting distance from the memories and the scandal. He'd retired from his job as an accountant, which I found grimly ironic given his wife's financial crimes. He seemed like a decent man who'd been blindsided by someone he thought he knew. After he left, I thought about how many lives Patricia had affected with her greed and arrogance. The homeowners who'd paid unnecessary special assessments, the board members who'd resigned in protest or been tainted by association, her own family destroyed by her choices, and me, caught in the crossfire simply because I wouldn't compromise my business principles. But I also thought about the positive outcomes, the road repairs that had been done properly, ensuring safety for the Meadowbrook Hills residents, the new governance structures that protected homeowners across the county, the precedent that had been set that business owners couldn't be bullied into unfair deals, and my own business growth built on a foundation of integrity that had been tested and proven strong. As I drove back to the quarry that afternoon, passing the familiar landscapes of Cedar Springs, I felt a deep sense of contentment. This town had been good to my family for 2 generations. My father had come here as a young man with nothing but determination and a willingness to work hard. He'd built a life, raised a family, and created a business that served the community. Now it was my turn to carry that forward. The quarry wasn't just about extracting and crushing stone. It was about relationships, reputation, and reliability. It was about being someone people could count on to do what I said I'd do, charge what I said I'd charge, and deliver what I promised to deliver. Those principles had guided my father, and they would guide me. The sun was setting as I pulled into the quarry, painting the piles of crushed stone in shades of orange and gold. The machinery was quiet, the workers having gone home for the day. I walked through the yard, checking on equipment and making mental notes about maintenance that would be needed soon. This was my domain, built on solid rock in more ways than one. I thought about what I'd tell someone facing a similar situation, someone being pressured to compromise their values or accept unfair terms. I'd tell them what my father told me. Know your worth, Stand your ground and don't let anyone make you feel bad for expecting to be treated fairly. I tell them that short-term conflict is better than long-term regret. I tell them that integrity isn't just a nice ideal, it's a practical business strategy that pays dividends over time. Most importantly, I'd tell them that sometimes the right thing to do is simply refuse to do the wrong thing. When Patricia Morrison tried to force me to accept a rate that would have hurt my business, the right response was just to say no. Not to negotiate endlessly, not to try to find a compromise that satisfied her unreasonable demands, but simply to refuse and hold firm. That simple refusal had been the catalyst for everything that followed. It had exposed corruption, changed governance structures, and ultimately strengthened my business, all because I believed that my work had value and that I deserved to be compensated fairly for it. As darkness fell over the quarry, I locked up the office and headed home. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and new opportunities. There would be orders to fill, equipment to maintain, employees to support, and customers to serve. The work would continue day after day, year after year, built on the foundation my father had laid and the principles he'd taught me. The Meadowbrook Hills situation was behind me now, resolved and finished. Patricia was serving her sentence, the homeowners had their roads repaired, and my business was stronger than ever. It had been a difficult period, full of stress and conflict, but I'd emerged from it with my integrity intact and my reputation enhanced. That was worth more than any amount of money Patricia Morrison could have offered, and it was worth every moment of the struggle it had taken to protect it. I owned the only gravel quarry the HOA needed, and in the end, they did pay my rate. Not because I forced them to, but because it was fair, it was right, and it was the only way honest business could be conducted. And that, I realized as I drove through the quiet streets of Cedar Springs toward home, was exactly how it should be.